Welcome to another episode of Emozen in the Wild. I'm Krista Anderson, your host, and my guest today, I have been tickled pink to interview her. It's a friend and colleague, and her name is Justice Bartlett. She is a wise woman, a writer, a grandmother. Let me add, excellent writer, a grandmother, a dog lover, a mountain woman dog lover. And the heart of her work is very soulful, heartfelt. In fact, you just rebranded as the Soul of Justice, correct?
For my Substack, for my writing,
For your
yes.
Substack. Okay. And so that is one place that you could follow her on Substack. We'll get to that a little bit later. We're going to be talking about resonance today, and an example of how resonance works in our lives as practitioners, energy workers, healers, is this. So Justice is an amazing writer, as I already mentioned. And a few years back, as happens sometimes, Facebook just eliminated all of her writing. Well, I had been following Justice and I didn't know her personally yet. And I tore through the internet to find her work because it was so healing for me. And so I reached out and I shared my experience with her, and I did some work with her after that. And it built a friendship because we have so much resonance. And I'm so grateful I found you again after Facebook tried to excommunicate you for whatever reason they chose to do that.
I
Yeah.
never found out. I never found out what I did.
Did you get your work back, by the way?
No.
No. Wow. Okay. But yeah, resonance, how would you, I don't know that we need to define it, but how would you describe it when you're talking about resonance? How is that relevant in your work?
So, resonance, when you break it down into the body in the most basic way, the easiest way to feel resonance is to listen to the sound of your own voice and feel the reverberation of your voice through your body. That's resonance, right? And the shared experience of resonance and the kind of work that we do is that listening, is that attunement, is feeling for. I don't play musical instruments, but I love musical instrument analogies because I find them to be so useful. Because if you're trying to play an instrument that is out of tune, the resonance of the instrument is going to be off. So our work, I think, is really very much fine tuning these instruments that are our bodies, that are our lives, that are instrumental. And if you want to have, resonance, then you need an instrument that's in tune, right?
Ah, yes. And that resonated with me because I felt one of the ways I feel resonance is my heart, just I felt it in my heart, and I got really excited and my eyes got hot. And it's not that I was going to cry, just that was my body's somatic response. And what I mean by somatic is of the body, feeling in the body. A lot of times people don't know what I mean when I say that. But yeah, the somatic work, if we don't feel safe in our bodies, there's no healing that's going to happen. We can intellectualize it all we want, but if we don't have that resonant safety with a healthy other and that witnessing of that resonance, I mean, you can almost watch. I know what it looks like for me in session when I'm resonating with a client, like, and I know what it feels like too. I get hot when energy starts to move. I get hot, and after really good sessions like that, I get tired, right? But I can also see the color in their skin change. It's like I can hear their breathing shift. What do you notice, Justice?
I do a lot of my work over Zoom like this.
Mm-hmm.
So I do pay attention for those physical cues, for the color in the skin to change, to pay attention if they're leaning back or if they're leaning forward, if they're closing in on themselves and protective posture, if they're rocking. There's so many indicators by watching a person's body as to what's moving through them. And then for me, because I do tend to be very empathic, The feeling through my own body is a big indicator for me. I'm watching this person, but I'm also feeling in my own system. And I'm not going to be as arrogant as to say I'm feeling what they're feeling, because I don't know what they're feeling. But I know my own feelings and I know my own sensations in relation to the energetic exchange. And I track and I follow through that, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And it also makes sense that you said you don't project what you think they're feeling onto them, but you are noticing a change. So that's an indicator to check in with them, right?
Absolutely. What are you feeling? And I don't know if this is because I'm not a classically trained therapist. I don't follow classically trained
It's
therapist rules.
okay.
But I tend to also be very vocal about my emotions, because I do wind up with clients who aren't that emotionally attuned to themselves. Like, I will have people tell me stories, and I wind up working with people who have really been through some stuff. And my physical reaction, my emotional reaction, outrage, disgust, whatever it might be, I'm like an open book. It's there, you're going to read it. So a lot of the time for clients, they are getting the feedback that they never got from me for the first time. They tell me a story, I have this unfettered emotional reaction to what they're saying, and they're like, nobody's ever reacted to that information in that way. Like, it's new emotional information, which brings a new level of resonance into their field and into their body as well, and permission to have that experience if it speaks to them. Um, and I think that is a key part of the witnessing, right?
Yes.
Uh, I know I had a client who went through a very traumatic experience, and as you know, the lack of the witness in a traumatic experience is actually what cements the trauma. So she went from having this terrible experience to getting into a vehicle with a parent and having to hide the experience, not only not being able to share, but knowing very well that she could not share what had just happened to her. And so when she told me that, I could not, like, as a mother, the mother in me wanted to break down and break things and hold her and everything simultaneously. And her shock at somebody actually feeling that way, feeling the love, the care, the compassion, the protection for her that was not available in that moment, was what allowed her to actually break down her own numbness and sort of confusion around the experience and move into a more emotional resonant state for her as well.
I am so grateful that you gave that example. Thank you, because that is so powerful. And I'm going to connect that to you saying you're not a classically trained therapist. That's one of my favorite things about you, because classically trained therapists, which I am, but I'm not, I practice differently than that. I mean, yeah, I know how to do all the things, but that's not the way I work, because I am so attuned and resonant, and everybody deserves that compassionate witness, because you cannot heal trauma by yourself. There is not a DIY event at all. And so for you to be able to witness, I mean, gosh, the times I've worked with you, when you witnessed me, no professional has ever done that before. You know, you're trained to be neutral. Well, you can't be neutral in the face of trauma. I think it is almost an insult to be neutral in the face of someone's trauma. It doesn't mean, I'm not saying you have to break down with them, but leaning in and getting angry and being like, wow, I can only imagine how hard that must have been for, yes, yes, that. And it blows my mind that people are still trained to be neutral in situations that warrant connection. You can't connect and be neutral. That's a fact,
Mm,
right?
yeah, I agree with that. Something Brene Brown said about shame: when shame enters the room, it can take over the system. I understand that from that perspective. You have to maintain enough containment. You have to stay contained when
Yes.
you're acting as that, for another person, right? You're not talking about, sitting with a lover or something and breaking down at the awfulness of what they've experienced. It's not to that degree. There's still a degree of containment, and specifically the shame has to absolutely be kept from transferring, because you can't operate under the influence of shame either in a therapeutic or in a compassionate state. So there's a distinction. We're not talking about blending, we're not talking about melding, we're not talking about adapting the other person's emotional state, but we're talking about emotional communication, right?
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you for taking that deeper. That's why I love chatting with you, because we pick up on each other's things and can go deeper with that. Um, Absolutely. And I love how you said that. Yes, it's a professional containment, but it's not passive neutral, right? There are two completely different things. It's not like you break down and cry with them. Although there are times in the 25 years I've been doing this, the story has been so horrific that I have had tears in my eyes with them. It's not like I'm crying with them. I'm witnessing their pain. And that's what you're talking about. It's still contained, but it's such a horrific story. You would have to be inhuman sometimes to not feel on that level, right?
I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've been to workshops with some like traditionally clinically trained people. Actually, John and Julie Gottman and Dan Siegel. John and Julie Gottman are internationally known marriage and family therapists, and Dan Siegel is a researcher of mindfulness at UCLA. And they did a combo retreat together for 4 days out at University of Washington, and it was interesting. Dr. Julie Gottman is the social worker, and her husband, John Gottman, is the researcher. So she applies his work. It's a nice little symbiosis that they have going. But she was talking about working with someone who was so traumatized, a couple, and they were too traumatized to do the work together initially. And so she started working with her, and the woman laid down on the floor in session, and she said, "Do you mind if I lay next to you so I can see your face?" And she literally laid next to her and conducted session on the floor looking at her. And I thought that was
Mhm.
such a brilliant bit of humanity right there, right? And she's like, "I know it goes against everything we're trained to do." She needed it. I chose it. I discerned and chose. And I think that's
Mhm.
what you and I are talking about with that resonance. You have to be able to read that space and be self-contained enough that you make wise decisions about what to do in those heated situations. So thank you for taking that deeper like that.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's powerful, and I feel like it's an honor. I feel that it's very humbling to work with people in that way, to meet people in that space. Um, there's such a deep respect for people's vulnerability. And if you don't have that respect for people's vulnerability, you really shouldn't be doing the work.
100%. 100%. And I think, you know, there's a saying in our profession that you can only take your clients as far as you've been yourself. So it's really imperative that not only are you aware enough of resonance to be attuned to the people with whom you're working, you need to have a circle around you that can fill in your blind spots, right?
Mhm.
I would trust you to fill in my blind spots, to say, "Oh, you might be missing that," you know? Um,
Mhm.
or you said, was it this morning or yesterday? I was talking with you about something regarding my mom. You're like, "No, no, no, you can do that. You do enough. You can stop doing that." I
Yeah.
don't have people that will say that to me, because, and my kids are really good about filling in my blind spots too, you know?
We
Um,
need those people. I mean, I think in a professional capacity, that's one of our roles.
yeah.
I know for me, a part of the resonance is in tracking patterns, but what patterns feel like to me. Again, I should be a musician because I
You
see it.
understand the theory of it,
I
right?
understand the theory of it completely. I just don't play an instrument. But I see these patterns that comprise people's, relational difficulties, or even like the stuff that works its way into their body that becomes an illness, that becomes some kind of condition or whatever. I can see the complexity of the patterns and where the resonance is off, and often very easily pinpoint to the moment in the timeline in their life to when that happened, because I can feel it.
Mhm.
Um,
And feeling that because you're so emotionally attuned, empathic, you might be feeling something they are frozen in feeling. So how do you check in with the client to make sure it's not a projection, right?
um, I like to offer, and the reason that I call my work senses and symbols is because the body comes first, but I notice things very symbolically. So a lot of the time I offer clients symbols that I see, that I intuit, and ask them if that is something that resonates with them. And a lot of the time it'll be some random little thing that opens up some kind of key memory or relational association for them, that it just appears to me as a symbol. So I give it to them to make with of what they will. I share from a perspective very much the way that we do our dream interpretation of, this is what I notice, and I'm offering this to you, and please tell me if that has any significance, or if it doesn't have significance, then we wipe it off the table and we move on to something else, right?
I like the way that you use the dream work. One of the other things that you do that I've benefited from the last 2 years is your dream workshop, your dream keys group. And I just wanted to mention that because there is a lot of resonance, because the group, since I've been involved, it's been the same the last 2 years. I know you did it before I joined, but it's a camaraderie. There's a resonance with that group. Like there's just a safety there, you know, and it's powerful stuff. And I know we don't have to do this here, but a lot of times when you're just developing a relationship with someone, I wanted before the resonance is locked in, if you will, because you can resonate a tune and eventually it starts harmonizing. You get layers of resonance. There's an initial resonance, and then there's a depth of resonance. Do you like my sound effects? I
Mm-hmm,
use?
mm-hmm.
um, so yeah, it's that depth of resonance, and the longer you're with people, the more you trust, the more you open up. um, I was going to mention, I think I was going somewhere else with that. I'll come back to it in a second because I'm thinking my mind jumped ahead. But one of the ways that I describe resonance, and I do have tuning forks in my office that I use with people because it can
Mm,
help vibrate blocks sometimes too. It can vibrate those out if you know what you're doing and you're using the right frequency, because frequency is a big deal too,
sure.
right? Right. But so, for instance, if um, the three of us, you, me, and my producer Andre, who is no one can see, but he's here, and I can feel his resonance. If we were sitting in the room and I had a C tuning fork, and you had a C tuning fork, and Andre had a B tuning fork, I tap that C tuning fork, his isn't going to do anything.
Mm,
Your C tuning fork would resonate. Ours would start to resonate. And as they kept resonating, eventually his would attune, like become in tune, but it would harmonize with the C tuning fork. It would never vibrate at that frequency. So
sure.
that's what our bodies do too. And that's the electromagnetic frequency we have. The heart is magnetic, the brain is electric. The heart sends 60% more electromagnetic frequency into the world than our brain does. We think it's the other way around. The heart sends more information to the brain than the brain sends to the heart back. And I don't think, because the smarter you are, the more you want to intellectualize and stay in your head. And then you get headaches. And it's like, no, you got to drop into your heart. And it's interesting teaching people to do that, because that's where your resonance comes from, is your heart.
And I think that's what when I first started talking about the voice and feeling the voice in your body, um, you can tell if somebody is more embodied when they start to speak and they can feel themselves. You can learn to feel yourself. Where's your voice coming from, right? People who are in their head, there isn't a lot of reverberation through the chest. They may sound more nasally, may have a harder time catching their breath, right? Um,
Brilliant insight. Yeah. Thanks for mentioning that. Yeah.
Whereas people who are coming more from their heart or from their full body tend to tend to be able to move slower, be able to speak a little bit slower, more deeply. You can feel the voice and everything behind it more fully. Something that I learned years ago when I was learning public speaking was learning how to slow down, speak from lower in the body, right?
You do
Um,
have to slow down to do that. So I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just went, something clicked in my brain. Thank you.
yeah, you definitely do.
And I didn't mean to cut you off. Was there more?
No, that's good.
Okay.
No, that's good.
Because I really liked what you were saying, and I just got excited, and I jumped in. I was like, oh, I feel that. Yeah. Um, that whole, and interestingly enough, I think, and I don't know what language you use for this, but in my field, that traditional therapeutic crowd, it's called therapeutic alignment. When you have a
Mhm.
bond, with your client, and that, and research shows this too, that bond is more important than any modality you would ever use.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And the thing that I really love about you is that your client relationships are sacrosanct. They are, they're your people, and you've got them, right? I felt
Very
that.
much so. Yes, I feel protective of my clients.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that's another thing that a lot of the people who are drawn to my work seem to need is for whatever reason they weren't sheltered. So having that sense of shelter from someone who is witnessing you as well is a really big deal.
It sure is. And one of my other favorite things about you that I wanted to highlight, and it still is in the theme of being resonant or resonance, is your writing. You choose words that actually embody the energy that you want to convey. I mean, you are exquisitely good at that. And that makes your writing very provocative. And you're a brave writer. You say things a lot of people aren't brave enough to say. Where does that come from in you?
I don't know. I hear it, I have the internal dialogue. I type it as I hear it. I write it as I hear it. And I think I probably years ago, 20 years ago when I started journaling, I started cultivating that voice because I intuitively picked up the therapeutic inquiry practice with myself to
Wow.
where I would ask myself questions in my journal and I would allow my higher self or whatever my knowing self to answer the questions back, and I figured out a lot of things that way and I learned to trust myself that way. But I think the other thing that I simultaneously did through that process is I honed that internal voice so that now when I sit down to write, I've literally fallen off my chair as I was typing something, like because it tickled me so much. Like it was as much a surprise to me as anybody else who's going to read it later. I'm like, that's resonant.
Hilarious. Thank
That's
you for sharing that. So you'll be writing and you get so tickled with yourself, you just like guffaw yourself off the
yeah,
chair.
actually dropped out of my chair.
That's perfection. I can
Mhm.
totally see it happening too. That's great.
But
That's
it doesn't, because it feels very inspirational. It doesn't feel like me. Um, it doesn't feel like my normal brain thinking. It feels like it comes from a sort of an altered state or something, right? I'm cautious with the word channeling because there's no one I'm channeling except for myself, but I'm channeling a smart, sassy side of myself. Smart, sassy, wise, right? So sometimes the things that part says are a surprise to me, and I feel that part comes through in my session work as well, because there are things that come out of my mouth that are not only deeply resonant with my clients, but that are also a little bit of a surprise to me. Like I hear it, I say it, well, I'm not going to filter it, like I'm going to say it, and they're like, oh,
and then they're like, oh yeah,
that
yes,
that nails it, right?
yes, yeah. You know, um, one of the things too that I think resonance involves that people don't often talk about because most people like to keep it on the lighter, brighter side. And this isn't anything heavy for you and I. We've talked about it before, but I trust you so much as a colleague and friend and fellow crone, that you could say something or you could disagree with me or I could disagree with you and it would not affect the friendship because I like how you think. And when you say something that I might not have thought of and might initially go, I don't know what I think about that, it always prompts me to go, well, if justice is thinking it, you need to go deeper and see where it's coming
Mm.
from. And it always opens my mind. And it's okay to disagree with people that you care about and love. It actually allows, if everyone agrees, someone is not necessary. Honest. I mean, I don't mean that in a dismissive way. I'm just like, we're here for the diversity of thought, right?
Yeah, I feel very I feel cautious about the echo chamber phenomena.
Yeah.
Um, in friendship, in the spiritual community, in the political community. Um, I feel very mindful about it. I don't want one of those in my life. So if everybody's agreeing with you, you need to diversify your
Yes.
information.
Yes. I agree with you. And I love that about you. And I do that because of our friendship. And so thank you for that. I think you're very good about, and it's interesting how some people can't pivot and go, oh, I never thought about it that way. Tell me more. Right. Is like their core character is getting attacked and
Well, and
it's
part of
unfortunate.
the attunement is I think I don't like to think of people in the the NPC, right? The non person player way.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you can very much tell when you come up against trance in a person, when they have become so entranced with an idea, an ideology, that you are no longer speaking to that person. You are speaking to the level of trance which they have ingested. And I find it very difficult to want to pursue communication past that point because I don't feel compelled to break that down in someone unless they're asking me and paying me to do it. So,
Fair. Well, and they're not grounded, right?
no,
If they can't go, oh, well, not everybody thinks like me. So yeah, great question.
it's
Never
not
thought
even
about
that
it that way.
not everybody thinks like them. It's more like there is a repetition of a script that pops in and takes over, and the actual consciousness of the person really kind of steps out.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I like that you gave that more detail
You
because
can see it with these cultural narratives
yeah,
that
yeah,
get spun around
yeah.
when a person is no longer really thinking for themselves, when they're repeating talking points. You have just encountered a level of internalized cultural trance.
And I can feel the difference. You and I have talked about that. I've felt entranced with certain artist or whatever. We've talked about that.
Sure.
And I was like, oh, I see that because of the conversation, right? It's like, oh, I see, I'm entranced. And that's different than thinking. That's different than just liking the music, you know? That's different than just liking the writing or the performance. It's a feeling of floating for me. It's not being grounded in my body at that moment.
Very much
Um,
so.
and
Well,
I'm
and
noticing,
so where my training does actually come in is I am trained as a certified hypnotherapist.
okay,
And the way that I was actually trained in that modality is that people come to us for therapeutic assistance in the framework that whatever it is they are suffering with is the actual trance. So the way that I put my work into context is that I'm not putting people under trance, I'm taking them out of the trance that they're already in.
beautiful.
So returning them to the sensations in their body, to that sense of awakeness, of aliveness, that's at the core of my work.
One of the things I say, a little catchy jingle that goes on in my head and I speak in session, is the trance ends when you transcend your old beliefs. So it's just break out, transcend. Now I'm noticing we've got about 5 more minutes, and I want to make sure that I give you an opportunity to let people know how to get a hold of you, right? If they watch this, and how do you get in touch with Justice and her transformative work?
You can find me through my website, sensesandSymbols.com. I'm
Thank you.
actually having a little mini immersion here next weekend on the volatile femininity, the volatile feminine.
Which I'm
Um,
going to. I'm joining you.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad you're one of my favorite volatile females. um, and as is so much of my work, it's about working with relevant energy. So the energy that has been coming at us from this cultural standpoint has a lot of us, I imagine, feeling really angry, hurt, upset, grieving, lot of extreme emotions. Helping specifically the female body channel those emotions into aligned action so that we can move that energy and not harm ourselves with that energy. That's really going to be at the root of this workshop.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you for saying that. And then, so you senses and symbols, and can you mention your Substack again so people can follow that too?
The Soul of Justice is the title, and I know it feels good, doesn't it?
Yes.
And I rebranded for that whole resonance factor recently because I felt my name needed to be in my writing. It just spoke to me one day, and here we are. But it's justicebartlett.substack.com. If you just want to type it into your browser, it's just my name. Justice Bartlett is my Substack. So,
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
thank
Um,
you.
I always enjoy talking to you. I would love to chat with you. We could probably do a whole series of conversations about things at some point.
Yeah.
So I just want to thank you for being on this show tonight, Justice, and be sure to follow Justice at her Substack and on her website where she just mentioned. And I want to thank I Am Beast Network for producing this. And I appreciate you joining me for another episode of Emozen in the Wild, where we talk about science, soma, and soul. Really, it means mind, body, and soul. And then we pull them all together so that it resonates out to the world. Thank you for joining me this evening.